500 plus practice GRE vocabulary words. 100% pass. Abase heavy check mark V. To humiliate, cause to feel shame. V. To hurt the pride of. Abash heavy check mark V. To embarrass, to cause to be embarrassed. Abate heavy check mark V. To make less active or intense. V. To become less in intensity. Abdicate heavy check mark V. To give up power. Aberration heavy check mark in. An aberrant state or condition. In. A disorder in a person's mental state. An optical phenomenon which results from the failure of a mirror or lens to produce a good image. Abet heavy check mark V. To assist or encourage, often in the case of wrongdoing. V. To support, uphold, or maintain. V. To contribute to the commission of an offense. Abeyance heavy check mark in. A temporary suspension or cessation. In. A temporary suppression. 1/4. Abhor heavy check mark V. To find repugnant, or to shrink back with dislike or horror. Abjure heavy check mark V. To reject something. V. To retract an oath. V. To recant. Aboriginal heavy check mark in. An original inhabitant of any land. In. An animal or plant native to the region. Abortive heavy check mark ADJ. Failing to accomplish an original intent or goal. ADJ. Imperfectly formed OR. Developed. In. Something that is born prematurely. ADJ. Made from the skin of a stillborn animal. Abscond heavy check mark V. To run away, often taking someone or something along. V. To hide, withdraw, or be concealed. Absolve heavy check mark V. To release from moral wrongdoing. V. To grant remission of a sin. Abstain heavy check mark V. To refrain from engaging in a certain act. V. To voluntarily refrain from, especially when having to do with an act involving the appetite or senses. 2/4. Abstemu adigi. Sparing in consumption of, especially in relation to food and drink. ADJ. Marked by moderation in indulgence. Abyss heavy check mark. A gulf or pit that is either bottomless or which possesses an unfathomable and inconceivable depth and infinite time. Abysmal heavy check mark ADJ. Boundless and vast. Adj. Unfathomable. Accede heavy check mark V. To give into or yield to someone else's wishes or desires. V. To be in accordance with, to agree. Acclivity heavy check mark in. An upward grade or slope on the earth. Accolade heavy check mark in. To praise. In. A symbol that signifies distinction or approval. In. A ceremony that was formerly used to bestow knighthood. Accoutre heavy check mark V. To provide with military equipment. 3/4. Accretion heavy check mark in. An increase brought about by natural growth. In. An increase in a beneficiary's awarded portion of an estate. Acetic heavy check mark ADJ. Containing or relating to acetic acid, vinegary smell or taste, particularly in relation to wine. Acidulu coche caractère gras ADJ. Tasting sour like. Acme heavy check mark in. The highest degree or level attainable, the highest point of something, mature age. In. The crisis or height of a disease. Acquiescence heavy check mark in. Acceptance without resistance or protest. Assent or submission. In. Criminal law. Submission to an injury by the injured party. Acquiescent heavy check mark ADJ. Willing to carry out someone else's orders or wishes without any protest or dissent. ADJ. Submissive. Actuate heavy check mark V. to trigger a reaction or to move and incite to action. V, to carry out or perform. Powered by TCPDF, www.tcpdf.org/4.